Get to the point, Puck growled, baring his wolf fangs. We don't care about some regular wolf. When did I show up? Let him finish, Wolf, Uncle Jake said. Back then, magic was something people feared, so I begged Tobias to leave. We were getting set to go and get some help when the little girl arrived. Red Riding Hood? Robin asked. Hatchet nodded. She came skipping up to the house and knocked on the door. The witch told her to come inside, and she did. They hugged, and I realized the witch was the child's grandmother. A moment later, the old woman was helping the child into one of the empty cages and turning her wood machine on. That's when Tobias decided to act. He was really brave. He didn't give it a second thought. He just stormed into the house and attacked the witch. I'd never seen anything like it. They felt like animals until Tobias knocked that clay jar out of the witch's hand. It shattered on the ground, and then, well, you wanted to know when the big bad wolf showed up. That's when it happened. I'm confused, Howard, Granny said. What happened? The madness that was inside the wolf wrapped itself around Tobias. It seemed to seep into his pores, and a moment later my boss was gone, and the big bad wolf was born. Red's grandmother created the big bad wolf? Daphne asked. Hatchet nodded. The witch's spell transformed him into the monster. After that, Tobias didn't exist anymore. It was only the wolf. He was like that for a long time, until 15 years ago, when I heard he had gained control. Sabrina reached into her pocket and felt the energy of the kazoo. She realized the tiny object had big secrets, more than she had originally suspected. Then what happened to the grandmother? Puck asked. She fought him as hard as she could. There were so many spells coming out of her, but none seemed to hurt the wolf. He just kept coming and she was no match for him, Hatchet said, then looked into Puck's face. She was no match for you. What else can I tell you? Did you even fight the wolf? Daphne asked. No, I hid, Hatchet whimpered. After a little while, when I was sure the wolf was gone, I stumbled upon the child. I took her back to her village, but her family was gone. They had deserted her, so I took her to the local sheriff. And that's when you made up the story of how you had saved her, Sabrina said, disgusted. I figured what could hurt. The child was out of her mind anyway. She would repeat whatever I told her. You took advantage of a little girl who had just witnessed her grandmother's murder, Mr. John bellowed. What she saw drove her insane. The thought of having to deal with the huge lawyer as well as the wolf was obviously too much for Hatchet, and he broke down into tears. That's not my fault. She was crazy when she showed up at the house. You could see in her face. Even the witch was afraid of her. Robin tapped Puck on his huge shoulders. Let him up. Oh, come on, Puck said. I don't think he even wet his pants. As Hatchet climbed to his feet, Puck's disguise began to fade. The would-be hero watched with alarm. What is this? Sorry, but the hands of justice are unfair in this town, said Robin. We've had to learn to play dirty too. What you've told us is going to be a great help to our case. Hatchet turned Rattlefinger. No one will believe you. I'll lie. I'll tell them you're making it up. I'm a hero. They'll believe me. I'm sure you're right, Robin said as he reached into his jacket pocket. When he removed his hand, he was holding a small tape recorder. That's why I brought this. He pressed the stop button and then rewound it, playing back Hatchet's confession. I'll look like a fool. I'll be ruined. Mr. Hatchet, You do quite a good job with that all on your own, Granny said. You are a charlatan who has lied his way into fame and fortune. If I were you, I'd change my ways, because I know the real big bad wolf, and he's not quite as nice, and he's not as nice as Puck. Hatchet rushed out of the shack. Do you realize what we have here? Robin said, waving his tape recorder in the air. We now have proof that Canis didn't mean to kill the old woman. In fact, we might even be able to argue that the old woman is responsible for all the mayhem the wolf has created. She literally unleashed the wolf on the world. But will it matter? Sabrina asked. Chapter 8. At the end of another long day, after Uncle Jake dashed off for a late dinner with Briar Rose, Granny suggested everyone else get some sleep. She was sure tomorrow will be a big day in Mr. Canis' trial, perhaps even the day their old friend will be freed. The girls and Puck said goodnight to Granny and Elvis and climbed the steps to their bedrooms. The girls said goodnight to Puck at their door. He grunted and kept walking down the hall. Unfortunately, Sabrina was dragged along with him. Oh, I forgot about you, Puck said, eyeing the handcuffs. What are we supposed to do, fairy boy? Sabrina cried. We're not sleeping in the same bed. Who cares about that? I'm going to have to go to the bathroom eventually, Puck mumbled. He could sleep on the floor in our room, Daphne said. I'm not sleeping on the floor. I'm royalty, Puck declared as he puffed up his chest. Sabrina could sleep there. That's not going to happen, Sabrina said. Puck huffed and frowned. Fine, come with me. He led the girls down the hallway to his bedroom. The door was covered in signs. Death awaits all who enter here, and warning falling rocks. There was also a picture of a kitten with the words, cuteness will not be spared. Puck pushed open the door and patiently ushered them inside. Sabrina had been in Puck's room before, but had never ceased to amaze her. It wasn't like any bedroom she had ever seen. The night sky was the roof, the frost ground the floor, and a trickling brook led to a lagoon in the distance. A chirping of crickets and the rustle of woodland animals drifted across the air like a lullaby. The room was magical, and from what Sabrina could tell, endless. Who knew how far the water rolled downstream? If you followed it, would you find an ocean at its end? Sabrina didn't know, but she wondered about it from time to time. Puck dragged the girls down to where the room's serene beauty came to a dismaying end. There they found a path littered with broken army men and parts from old skateboards and microwaves. Sabrina nearly stepped into dozens of half-eaten birthday cakes. They climbed up an embankment where they found a trampoline. A panda bear was sound asleep on its surface. Puck shooed it away. It staggered off, looking for someone else to sleep, barking and growling grumpily with each step. Puck helped Daphne onto the trampoline, then Sabrina, and together the girls pulled him up behind them. I love it, Daphne said, jumping up and down and bouncing like a ball. Good to know, Puck grumbled. My only concern is making sure the two of you are comfortable. Now go to sleep and leave me alone. Puck lay down, forcing Sabrina to do the same. She nudged as far away from him as possible, feeling entirely uncomfortable. Daphne nestled between them, her head at the tips of their fingers. The handcuffs forced them to sleep on their backs. It was hard to get comfortable, and each time Sabrina drifted to sleep, she felt Puck's hand drag her hand this way and that. Eventually, she decided that despite her best efforts, sleeping was out of the question. Instead, she wrestled on resting. She closed her eyes and lay still, listening to the bubbling water in the distance. You awake? Puck asked. Yes, Sabrina said. Their voices seemed loud in the open air. When are you going to tell her what you did? Sabrina bristled. Maybe you should mind your own business. Puck laughed, as if I could around this place. Every time I turn around, the two of you are facing down death. Monsters, robots, dragons, saving your butts is a full-time job. His tone made her angrier. Then why don't you go back to being a villain? I liked you a lot better when you weren't trying to save us. I'll go back to being a villain if you go back to the way you were, Puck said. And how was I, Mr. Smarty Pants? For one, you were honest, Puck said. The words were like a smack in the face, and her cheeks grew hot. Who was he to tell her how to be a good person? Wasn't his name the Trickster King? He'd been treating people like chumps for 4,000 years. You'll want to talk. Puck chuckled. I am a lot of things, Sabrina. Mischievous, mean-spirited, gassy, but they don't make me a bad person. They make me immature. You, however, are skating very close to a line. You stole from someone who trusted you, and then you lied about it. Sabrina wanted to get up and storm away, but she knew the handcuffs wouldn't let her. She was forced to hear his sermon about good and bad, no matter how ridiculous it sounded. I did what I had to do. Daphne would never have gone to get the weapon. Mr. Canis could eat Granny Elvis in half of Vertiport Landing, and she would still totally trust him. I'm the only one that sees what he's becoming. Who's arguing with you about that? It's obvious to most of us that Furface is in trouble. I won't even say you're wrong about wanting to do something about it. Then what's the lecture for? The lecture's because the way you're all going about these things kinda stinks. It's all nice and noble of you to want to do the right thing, even if I do think it's stupid. But if the only way to make something good happen is to do something bad, then maybe it's not worth it. Sabrina looked off into the dark forest, not wanting to see Puck's face. But what do I know? I'm not supposed to be a good person. But you are. You're Sabrina Grimm, and your sister worships you. You're supposed to be a good role model to her. Don't you think it's kind of odd that the Prince of Juvenile Delinquents is teaching you right from wrong? Sabrina mulled over Puck's words as she lay in the dark. She wondered if he might not be right. She knew she had betrayed her sister, but at the same time, she realized that she didn't really care about Daphne's opinion. She had been in charge of the two of them ever since their parents disappeared, and things had worked out just fine. If she had let Daphne vote on their futures, the two of them would be in a heap of trouble. By the way, Puck said softly, it had been an hour since he had last spoken, and she was startled to hear him still awake. You don't need the makeup. Sabrina felt like her face was on fire. He heard about her late-night beauty sessions, and if she had heard him correctly, he was also admitting that he thought she was pretty. She looked over at him and found he was looking at her. I kinda wish I hadn't said that, he said. Me too, she replied. Would it help if I said you were a stinky, muck-covered toad face? Sabrina nodded and edged as far away as she could on a trampoline. Puck did the same. Hello? Uncle Jake's voice echoed from near the lagoon. We're here, Sabrina shouted as she sat up, taking Puck with her. Together they shook Daphne awake. Come on, I found our mysterious Goldilocks again. She's in Paris. When the children followed their uncle into Mirror's room, they found Briar Rose sitting on the bed next. That's going to be the end of this video. I'll send more later. Goodbye.